Whenever we talk about someone who's groaning, we usually think about it as somebody that's complaining, right? Why is that person always groaning about something? They're always complaining about something that's petty or unimportant, and that's kind of how we think about the idea of groaning. But then surprisingly, in this gospel, we see that Jesus also groaned. We see Jesus groaning in this gospel passage. But of course, it's not something petty that he's complaining about. It's actually a groan for something that is deeply important, something that is very profound. And in fact, his groan is about the most important problem that humanity faces. And so what's the context here? Well, he's going about through the lands, and he meets this man who's deaf and mute, and the people beg him to lay his hands upon him and to cure him of his deafness and his muteness. And so Jesus takes the man off to the side, and as he sees this man, he kind of gets to know him more. He understands his affliction, and Jesus' heart is moved. Jesus' heart is very moved by the affliction that this man is suffering. You know, you can imagine being deaf or being mute. It would probably be difficult, especially if it's something new in your life that you're not used to. It would be a very difficult thing to deal with. And so Jesus, his heart is moved with pity for this man. And so he looks up to heaven, he looks up to the Father, and he groans. This groan is like, it's an expression of grief, right? It's an expression of grief for the affliction that this man is experiencing. So he groans and he prays to the Father. But if we think about this passage a little more, I think we see that Jesus' groan was not just for this man that was standing in front of him, but that in this sort of mystical sense, that man who was deaf and mute was standing for all of humanity, for all of us. And so when Jesus looks up to heaven and he groans, his heart is actually being moved by the affliction of all humanity, right? What he's grieving for is he's grieving for the effects of original sin that all of us experience. Because of original sin, all of us have kind of been brought into this situation that is not always favorable to us, right? And so we have disease, we have death, we have injury, we have all kinds of things that we experience, and it's a result of humanity's sin. And so Jesus, he's taking this moment just to grieve, just to express his sorrow to the Lord, and it's a prayer. It's grief, but it's also this prayer. He's saying, Father, please heal them, please free them from sin so that they can experience the life that you intended for them from the beginning. Because I think all of us know that, you know, the way that things are now, it's like something is not quite right? Something is up. Because we know that we weren't created to experience pain and suffering and death and all of the things that we experience. It's like, why does this happen to us, right? What is the reason? And the reason is because of original sin, right? Because of the sin of our first parents, and by extension our own sin. The sin in the world has created this problem for us. It's really the only problem that we face is the problem of sin. And why is that? Why would we say that disease and death and all these things are a result of sin? How does that make any sense? Well, when the human race turned away from God and started traveling away from him, we were traveling away from the source of life. And what happens when you distance yourself from the source of life? You start to decay. That's just what happens, right? When you travel away from the sun, the source of warmth, you start to get cold. And so that's what sin has kind of done to us, right? It's like we've turned away from God in certain ways, and now we've experienced this decay, this disease, and these problems that we have in our life. And certainly those problems are not contained to just having bad knees, although that's pretty bad. It extends beyond the physical realm to the spiritual realm too. And so sin has affected our thoughts, it's affected our attitudes, and even our capacity to love and our capacity to give ourselves to others. And so all of this is kind of the miserable state that we found ourselves in, right? Sometimes it's really tough being human, right? Sometimes life is pretty tough. And so Jesus, in this prayer of his, he's groaning for all of humanity, and he's grieving for the loss of that friendship and that perfection of our nature that we had before sin. But Jesus, of course, is way more powerful than our sin, right? Jesus is way more powerful than our sin. And so Jesus has come not to leave us in our sin and the state of original sin, but to bring us into this new life. He's come to heal us. And so that's what he does in the gospel today, doesn't he? He heals this man of his deafness and his muteness. It didn't take him anything, right? He just touched his ears, touched his tongue. He said a word, "Ephatha, be opened," and this man was cured of this affliction that might have, troubled him for the whole of his life. Jesus is much more powerful than sin, and he's come to undo the effects of original sin in the world and in our own hearts. Jesus has come to free us from our own deafness, not just physical deafness, but to free us from our deafness to the cry of our neighbor, to heal us from the deafness that we have to the cry of the poor or the cry of the earth. Jesus has come to free us from that deafness that keeps us from hearing the word of God and allowing that word to resonate in our hearts. And again, Jesus has also come to free our tongues, right? He's come to free us from our muteness, from all those times that we know we're supposed to say something, but we hold back. Maybe we're afraid, whatever it is, right? Those times when we know we could have spoken up for our faith, Jesus can come. Jesus can heal. Jesus can give us that new life, that new tongue, so that we can proclaim him, so that we can share our faith without fear, and so that we can say the right thing at the right time in the right way, according to God's grace. And so today we give thanks for the healer, Jesus Christ, for Jesus who, by the blood of his cross, has bound up the wound that we have sustained through original sin. He's come to heal us from all of that, to undo the effects of sin, to open our ears, to open our lips, and to open our hearts to the grace of God, which makes us new.